thank you everyone for being here today. So let me start with a vision. So what if we have 50 unicorns in the kingdom by 2030? So 50 unicorns by 2030. And some people may think it's a crazy idea. I actually think it's not possible. I think it's probable. It's actually likely to happen. And let me tell you a story of why I believe this is possible. If we can get back in time for a moment to 2018, and we move in space and we go to Latin America. At the time, Latin America was 10% of the population, 10% of the global GDP. It was 0.5% of the investment in venture. There were, at the time, 2 unicorns over there. 2021, only 3 years later, we had 28. So we moved to 2 to 28 in a span of only 3 years. And if you then ask the question of why was it possible? You know, what happened? And do we have those same assets here in the kingdom and here in the region? And the first point that comes to mind is people, and in particular, young people. And one metric that I'm sure all of you know, but it's a fascinating metric, is how many young people live in this part of the world. And you can say, you know, how many are the people that are below the age of 30, which is double the average of the G8 countries. So you have a significant amount of people here. The second big unlock was capital. And what you have here is visionary capital that actually want to boost innovation, wants to boost technologies. So also the second element is something that you have. The third element is technology. And I was reading just this morning a new metric, which the top 2 fastest mobile network in the world are actually in the region. And 4 out of 10 of the fastest mobile networks in the world are in the region, which is a big unlock to boost technology, to boost innovation, to boost entrepreneurship. You have another point, which is education. And let me demystify one fact, which is how important it is to have a degree to be a founder. You know, we all read the story of dropouts that create great companies, and so the myth of you have to be a dropout to be a great entrepreneur. Well, actually, the fact is 87% of the founders of startups actually have a bachelor degree or higher, 87. And then you can ask, yeah, but if you look at the unicorns and the one that really make it, it's different. Well, guess what? That number is 96%. So actually having an education is important. Then the question is what kind of education, but that's a different point. But having a bachelor degree or higher is an important one. Then there are some other dimensions that we need to work on. One point which is critical is a point around culture, is a point around mindset. In many countries, if you fail at something, if you fail at a company, you're stigmatized for the rest of your life. I'm coming from Italy. If you fail at a startup, if you fail at a company, you cannot be in the board for the next 10 years of your life. Guess what? People don't do it. So there are dimensions that need to change, but we are in a good track. I don't want to be exhaustive today, right? There are just to set a bit the tone of the point. But the ambition is 50 startups by 2030, and if feasible. Before I pass and introduce you to the panel that we have here, I'm grateful that they were able to make it. Let me give you one last point. We saw Latin America, 2 unicorns in 2018. Guess what? There are more unicorn founders from Latin America today sitting in this room than there were in all Latin America in 2018. This place is increasing its talent density at a way that is unseen. I would love to be here in the next few days, in the next few years, and see what can drive. It's really fascinating what is happening here. So I have the privilege to have today And let me go in the alphabetical order to avoid any mistakes. Sarah, thank you for being here. Sarah, both an investor and an entrepreneur today at Outliers Ventures. Thank you for being here. We have Mohamed from Yalla Group, the largest voice-based social media and entertainment network. Thank you for being here. We have Hicham, the president of a university focused on technology innovation, Mohammed 6 from Morocco. And then we have Faraz, which is the CEO of Noon, which you probably use every day. So let me start with a question, and the question is for you, Sarah. Yeah, you have seen entrepreneurs both as an entrepreneur, and now you see them as an investor. What is different with them? So why are entrepreneurs different than a typical corporate person?
Is this working? Awesome. So I guess the question is, how are the youth entrepreneurs different than other entrepreneurs? And I remember when I was thinking about this question, my first thought was, well, number one, is age relevant to entrepreneurship? And I have to say my gut reaction was not really. But then the more I think about it, the more I reflect on the conversations we have with the younger entrepreneurs. And what's always interesting with the younger generation of entrepreneurs is that they come with a very fresh mindset about how to address the problems that we're having. So one way to kind of look at it is experience can be a double-edged sword. If you try to do something and it didn't work out, you have this like data point that maybe it's not even worth kind of approaching that problem or that solution. What excites me about talking to younger entrepreneurs is they really come in believing that there are multiple ways to do things and there are fresh new ways to do things. And in many cases, startups don't work, not necessarily because a solution is not a fit or the problem is not worth solving, but rather because the timing is not right. So I guess this potentially was the most apparent difference between the two kinds of entrepreneurs. The second thing that's very interesting when it comes to seeing this new generation of entrepreneurs is that the landscape of like what the younger generation is engaging with, how they use technology, what they spend their time on is very different. So 10 years ago, I would spend my time on a handful of websites, maybe a couple of applications, and then that kind of set is completely different today. The opportunities to build using the infrastructure that was built over the last 10 years enables them to build completely different products using completely different infrastructures. So yeah, they come in with very different mindsets, with a very different landscape to build and very different ideas that can change the shape of the future.
Great, thank you. And Mohammed, if I can get to you on why... So we are in a world of scarce resources, scarce talent. Why do we need young entrepreneurs in a country, in an ecosystem?
I mean, I would look at, thank you first of all for getting us here and for being in FII. Looking at our story and the company, we have a quite very interesting entrepreneurial story. So we identified a need inside the market, and the team that started the company was quite young at the time. We were established 6 years ago, and then based on that we became the first technology unicorn to be in the have an IPO, the New York Stock Exchange. Why do we need young entrepreneurs? Because we 6 years ago were able to identify a need, which is basically that, as we've seen the last couple of years, the internet has grown very quickly, and we've seen mass big products from Facebook and WhatsApp, but we haven't really seen a lot of localized products for specific regions. Mm-hmm. Even though, if we look at it, those localized products actually are quite popular, like WeChat in China and Line in Japan. So the importance of youth, as Sarah was saying, they look at things with fresh eyes, and this is something that we identified. And I think that's why it's important to always have youthful entrepreneurs.
Thank you. A lot of the disruption happens because of them, so thanks to them. So it's important to have them. And having them localized, I think, is a great concept. Faraz, Hicham, if I can ask a question to both of you. So I described at the beginning the best moment to be here. The landscape for entrepreneurship will change dramatically. How do you see this entrepreneurship landscape changing in this part of the world in the foreseeable future, in the next years?
Thank you. I will start by talking about another region, which is Africa. As you know, UM6P is based in Morocco, African country. And here, the topic of this conference is invest in humanity. And more than 40% of the youth by 2050 will be based in Africa. So the ground is here to push this and to develop this mindset. In addition of all what you have just said regarding this region, about the technology, about the capital, about the youth, so now the future is to be built between Africa and this region. And this is very important because all the levers are, and the pillars are here. We need just to put more trust in this youth, that the VCs from all around the world have some trust in this youth because, and it was said before, these young are more committed to the development of their future. And there are a lot of issues, but for them it's a lot of opportunities.
Great. And along this concept, we have seen it the first day, the move, the economy is shifting from old countries to young countries, or country with old people to country to young people. And that's Africa, and here are at the top of that.
Exactly, and we are feeling it just here within the conference. So yeah, the future is to be built here.
Great. Faraz, what's your take?
Yeah, apologies, my voice is, I lost my voice yesterday, so it'll be a little scruffy. I've been lucky to kind of, I've seen the community startups sort of evolve over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, when we were launching Namshi, which is a fashion e-commerce site in the region, there weren't that many peers. I mean, a bunch of what we consider like, the breakout successes of our region were just starting out. So, I mean, I remember very vividly, Mudassir was thinking of starting Kareem, and, it started in front of us. And I think for entrepreneurs to get sort of, I think that community has evolved, and that's kind of fostering sort of downstream entrepreneurship. What's been fascinating to see, I mean, if you think about it as from a framework perspective, great entrepreneurs have a lot of ambition, right? And they have skill. And it's hard to be ambitious if you've not seen something successful in your general environment. 10 years in, at least in my journey, now we can look around and see so many amazing companies that have been built over the last decade. And that's inspiring a new cohort of founders, that's inspiring young kids to go start something, or young kids to go work at something that's not a telco or a consulting company or a job in government. I think that's the foundational shift that's happened in our region, and that's amazing because now we have AAA talent going to start companies. We've got thousands of people who worked at these startups in the region going to start new companies. I think the second part is skill. And I think 10 years ago, we were importing a lot of talent. We were going out to other emerging markets, bringing people who could do this, product managers, front-end engineers. Now you throw a stone in Riyadh or Dubai, you can probably find a good product manager, which wasn't the case 10 years ago. I think that's also a great enabling sort of force. And capital, I mean, it was impossible to raise any meaningful amount of capital locally 10, maybe even 7 or 6 years ago. And that's changed so radically with the success that local funds have seen with their investments, as well as sort of, I mean, we're at the FII. I run a company that has had the great fortune of having PIF as a direct investor, Mr. Alabar and his group investing in us as well. And you could legitimately say that, hey, my idea needs multiple $1 billion to become a reality, and you could raise that capital now. And I think that's a fascinating driver.
Great. So 50 startups by 2030, feasible?
50 unicorns. I think we might have 10 already, or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. But
So I guess yes. So let me get back to you, Mohammed, with one question. If you think about your building your company, what was the best advice that you got? What was the mentor that shaped how you were able to build your company? And I will ask the same to you, Faraz, in a second.
The journey of the company actually was quite interesting because initially the team had very good experiences around the world. So what sort of created a global vision for us all. We started thinking of everything as globally. We're not really stuck in a specific region. I mean, our story is quite interesting. We were headquartered in the UAE. Our R&D is in China, and we had an IPO in New York Stock Exchange. We were the first technology unicorn there. And basically that global vision had sort of fed us through. So in terms of talent, we look at talent all across the world. We try to recruit talent everywhere, not just regionally. Being in the New York Stock Exchange has allowed us to have capital from all around the world. So I think, yeah, the global vision that sort of came up from the team really fed us and is a big part of why we're continuing to develop.
Fantastic. Thank you. Faraz, best advice you got?
Was to embrace the place you're in. So, I mean, you have to heavily localize to be relevant. And I think that is a durable moat. And I think while a lot of founders will bring ideas from outside, you have to be local in your hardest market. Otherwise, you cannot succeed. Sometimes it might mean you have to build full stack. You have to build more parts of the value chain than you otherwise would. And I think it's important to embrace the context in which your company is going to exist. And the durable source of competitive advantage is going to be the degree to which you can localize, because that is eminently defensible.
Thank you. I have a question off script for the two of you. What is the best advice you give founders, entrepreneurs?
Well, there's a ton. We usually curate the advice based on the founder and what the company requires. But I guess one big one that we always focus on when we talk to our founders, especially at the earliest stages, is to really be thoughtful about the metric that you're working towards. So the difference between having a company that's optimizing for a vanity metric, like for example, we think GMV can potentially be a vanity metric, that can lead to a very different company compared to a metric that's like retention-based or transaction-based. So that's potentially one of the biggest advices that we usually give founders early on. Another big one is to keep hypothesizing. So one way to approach building is to say, this is a solution, I want to build it, I'll find someone to come and adopt the product or so on. It can potentially work. The approach that we like to adopt is to say, how can you hypothesize and then go to market, test, and then use that to guide your decisions on what is actually needed in the market.
Hicham.
Yeah, so and you said it in your introduction, we have an issue, if we take Morocco, for instance, with the failure. Mm. So it's a cultural, it's in our cultural identity. So we need to transform this failure as a asset, as a skill, which is not the case so far. So what we need to do is encourage them towards hypothesis. It means, yeah, you need to test. It won't work, but it doesn't matter. You need to keep on. You need to let it go, and you need to see the other thing. And this is very tough. That's why at some point education must be here to try to change this, because from the youth we are teaching, we are learning how not to fail, how to be the first in your class, how to be. It won't work like that. So I think in other countries, if you want to raise money, if you didn't fail at least 7 times, you won't get money. So because this is very important in this learning curve. So it's not, the advice was now you need to fail. Now you need to see failure as a new mean to grow.
Perfect, thank you. And let me show you a personal story. 20 years ago, when or 25, when I decided to go to school, in Italy, what people told you is a definition of success for your career is go and work in a bank go work in an insurance company, a telco, pick your favorite large company, stay there for the rest of your life. That was the aspiration, right? And didn't have great people like you there to actually told me, no, go out, try things. If you fail, it's fine. That mindset shift is generational. It takes time, but it's critical. It's critical to have it.
I'll just add to that. I think it's also important to understand that, I mean, romanticizing failure is also a failure. Some things just need time. You need to be persistent. There are going to be hard days, and I think one thing that I see sometimes is sort of like, founders running on easy mode. Like, my original hypothesis failed, so I pivoted into something else. I mean, look, you got to do something very consistently for a long period of time for sort of hypotheses to play out, for you to build capabilities. So I would just say, like, so many people quote Mark Zuckerberg and say, fail fast and break things, right? You know what? Facebook has changed that. That was the right thing for them to do, like 15 years ago, 10 years ago. But Facebook doesn't run by that motto anymore. It's like fail fast and break things as long as it doesn't compromise like infrastructure or something like that. So it's important to also sort of have the persistence, that crazy, the most exceptional quality that great founders have is grit. You need to have grit to last the distance. And I think it's important to recognize that.
I think it's a very important point, the difference between failing fast and giving up too fast. And deciding exactly where you want to have the balance is sort of the magic that makes a difference. Sarah, if I make a question to you now, building capabilities in youth entrepreneurs, it's important. What is your take on this? What have you seen as initiative to build capabilities at scale? What can we do to build capabilities at scale that are useful for young entrepreneurs?
100%. I just wanted to comment 100%
Please.
on like romanticizing failure. I think we think about this a lot. So for context, we're usually the first check into the company. So failure is not a potential option. It's almost an expectation. But I completely agree that the right way to approach this is just be extra thoughtful about what you're doing, and if failure happens, you adjust. But in terms of capabilities, I think there are multiple ways to think about this, right? So one thing is to say, well, we need to educate talent, focus on STEM education, and so on. That's one part of it. I think another way is to not stigmatize like non-STEM education. We're big fans of diverse backgrounds, diverse thinking. We like first principle thinking. We think a lot of philosophers end up becoming first principle thinking, physicists, engineers as well, of course. But education definitely is a big part of it, and I want us to not discriminate what education means within the context of startup building. So that's number one. The other thing is we're seeing a lot of interesting initiatives, top-down, bottoms-up, in terms of how can we enable a more thriving ecosystem. I think there's a bunch of hackathons happening, APIs being opened up by the government, by corporations, a lot of interesting collaborations happening in a way that can bring in younger talent, allow them to just experiment their way into finding a potential solution. And then finally, indirectly, I think it was you or Faraz that mentioned this, there are a lot of indirect ways to kind of inspire the younger generation to build the next, I'm not going to say unicorn, I'm going to say the next valuable company that's going to bring up more generation of founders. But just like setting the right example, right? So how to properly build a company, how to support the right national champions, and how to define what a national champion is. I think those are all components of just setting up the right stage for the next generation of future founders to emerge successfully.
Thank you. And Hicham, you are in this business of developing capabilities.
Exactly. So I think the best place to do that is at level university, but even high school if we could. But I will talk on behalf of university. So from us, from day one, we want to spread this mindset of entrepreneur. So we have something called learning by doing. For instance, just the day they come, the students come, we give them to build a robot. They have never seen a robot before. They don't know how it works. And we put them with other students they have never met. And they have 6 months to do that. without any supervision. So what they learn, so they fail at least 20 times. But at the end of the day, they succeed. And they won't forget what all the trouble they pass through. So we spread this mindset of learning by doing in all the curriculum. The second thing is we built what we call Entrepreneur Academy. So when we invite some successful people in this field to share this stories, experience with the student. The third thing, we tell them that the failure will be to work for a bank, for an insurance. If you are here for that, it's not the right place. So please, you can choose another university, you won't be here. And we are putting money, so we have a fund within the university. We are investing in the startup of our students. We just have small equity just to tell them we're here, but all the means of the university, what we call the living labs, which are full-scale capabilities. They have access to that, they have access to a data center, they have access to a high-performance computer, they have access to data, just to push them from day one. So, and we organize hackathons, we have partnerships with, for instance, MIT Sandbox and others, just to spread this mindset. And this is the most important. The last point is we are mixing people from different backgrounds. Because the most important thing is to solve a point, solve a question. And to answer this question, we need different skills. So, for instance, we have a coding school without a certificate, without a diploma. So, and they work hand in hand with students from the computer science, which is a very formal school. So, by mixing these skills, so they know that in life we need different perspectives to solve a question.
Great, thank you. What I take from this is that it's not as important what major you have, what you study, but it's much more important how you can instill the right mindset. Either it is learning by doing, putting people with different profiles, and that's what will bring it. And sharing another personal story, people that sometimes, I have a 6-year-old son, and people say, given that you like technology and you have this passion, probably you're telling me to study engineer. And I say, well, very likely not. I would probably tell him to study philosophy. And I say, why? The point is that in a time horizon of 20 years, we have absolutely no idea what will be the skills required, but having the curiosity and having the framework of mind will be more important. Machine will program machines, not human will program machines in 20 years. So it will be very different. And I think what you mentioned is exactly aligned with this one. It's the mindset, not the major.
Yeah, just one comment regarding that. The engineering schools, for instance, in France, they are building the capacity to answer a question which is known. And this is, it worked in the 20th century. Now we need to teach people how to answer a question which is it's unknown. So just to get back to your point.
Mohammed, getting back to you. What was the challenge, the highest challenge, the most difficult challenge that you faced? I'm sure that you faced many in building companies, but what is the most relevant one that you faced in your career? Faraz, I will get back to you as well of what is the challenge.
Yeah. Looking at the company overall, I mean, the main challenge, because it started 6 years ago, as you mentioned as well, Faraz, in terms of venture capitalists or investors at the beginning, it was quite a struggle at the beginning. That's why I think what you said is about having grit is very important. We knew exactly what we wanted to solve. We wanted to create high-quality, localized products for the region that were not there. And through that process, of course, then when the first product, which is Yalla, started improving and we started seeing people actually gain traction of that, it led sort of the roadmap for us to get into New York Stock Exchange 4 years later and have an IPO. That's why I think perseverance is very important, and having a very clear goal is very important, and having also the team around you believe on that goal, which was shared across all of us, was very important for the success. In terms of like technological challenges, at the moment you don't really see them as they have been before. You've seen a lot of cloud services now in the region, like Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services. Those maybe were a bit rare a couple of years ago. So at the moment, we're in that sort of expense, it's fine. But we still try to see other opportunities like digital payments, for example, within our applications as another opportunity for us to grow. So we've started to deploy digital payments within our applications, and we found that to be another opportunity for us to grow, which would later lead into other verticals that we could strategize about.
Thank you. Faraz, the challenge that come to your mind first.
Look, I'll answer it a little bit differently because as a company, your default state is dead. You know, like as a startup or sort of company that's like just getting out of the door, your default state is dead, and fighting that existential battle every day is hard. And I think very few people actually have the persistence to do it, and convincing a cohort of early employees at noon that you could get out of bed every morning and compete with the scariest company in the history of capitalism every day is hard. You know, and we do this to the day. Like, you know, if we go to sleep for like a week or 2 weeks, we'll get crushed. So for me, I feel like that on the continuum of things that are hard, I feel like building the resilience through your culture, through the mission orientation, through the DNA of the company, to persevere, to fight, to have the grit every day and to be excellent has been a challenge, and I think we fight it every day. And like I said, like default is dead. We're gonna die if we don't like fight. So yeah, I mean, I think getting into that mindset is important. There's a it's sort of like we regret it now, but there's a mural on the wall at noon. Actually, our lanyards say it as well. It says "Somos Bandidos," right? And that sort of genetic profile of the company is sort of like, you know, it's so crucial to success at the end. And I don't think we're successful. We'll be successful if like 10 years from now, this is an institution that is durable, it can outlast us, it can continue to serve people. We're the go-to kind of like convenience provider. So tomorrow you stop funding this company, it'll die in 2 weeks, right? So it's not successful. I think understanding that is quite crucial.
Thank you. We discussed a lot in the last 40 minutes around the changing mindset, the importance of changing the concept of failure. So how do you think we can do it? And this is a question for all of you. So what is the role that government has, that universities have, that family have, that your group of friends to change this mindset of failure is something to avoid, to what we said, it's not a romanticized failure, but have it at the right level?
Well, looking at youth entrepreneurship, maybe we can summarize it into basically when you're trying to do a new enterprise, you have three major problems or challenges. First of all, you're trying to identify what opportunities you want to solve or what product you want to create that will solve an issue. How and where to find the right talent that will sort of accelerate that process. And the third is, of course, very important as well, access to capital. So in terms of governments and business leaders, how can they help? But government and business leaders can either create their own venture capitalists, which we have seen the last couple of years, or invest in already founded venture capitalists, and also mentor the entrepreneurs, not just on how to build up their skills, but how to network, how to gain access into capital, how to meet people. Because at the end of the day, if you're creating a business and you know people who have capital, then you indirectly also have access to capital. Another thing that they can do is also keep having access to talents, create an environment that would get that kind of global talent individually. In terms of working as well, we've seen the last couple of years, a lot of companies actually strived working remotely. So again, back to what I was saying earlier, having a global vision that you of course look at local talent, but you don't just stick to where you are geographically in the world. There's a lot of great talent around the world, and now technologically you are able to recruit them and have them be part of your company and have it strive.
Sarah?
Yeah, I guess I'll I don't know if top-down celebration of failure is a way to do it, at least not from my perspective. The concept of embracing failure is such an internal one. It has to come from the individual. I see a couple of entrepreneurs here. I think they should be on stage talking to us about how they were persistent within the context of their journey. But one key thing for an entrepreneur to have, even like someone who's just like starting their career, is to just surround yourself with, within the context of entrepreneurs, investors that are open to understanding. So failure is a verb, and I think approaching that with curiosity rather than celebration or being indifferent or so on is a lot more interesting for me as an investor to say, okay, well, this happened, let's unpack this. What went wrong, what went right, how can we address it in the future? It's a stop, it's not necessarily a destination. Just like having that mindset, surrounding yourself with people who think the same way is just essential.
Thank you.
So from the perspective of the universities, I think that there is a need to be in touch with what the market is willing to have, and not like an ivory tower of the production of great science. This is good, we need to do that, but we need to change our manner to do education through spreading this, all what we have just said, within the curriculum, even change the way the education is done. From the government perspective, I think, we need them to just let the youth work at some point. So no regulation for that. We don't need, I think there is no need that the government will be very involved in the regulation for that. So if you let them do, they know what they are struggling with, they know what they should do, so they don't need some top-down decisions. So just let them work as freely as possible. From the family point of view, so just spreading this, changing what you have said. The great thing is not to look for a job where you'll be there for 40 years and work from 8 to 4 p.m. No, and we need that. I think with this generation, in the next 10 years, 20 years, it will be different.
Faraz, anything to add?
Thank you.
So let me go into the last question, and again, it's for each of you. If you have one wish that you could do to boost youth entrepreneurship, what would that be? I copied the question from day one. If you have a magic wand and you can do that, what will be your wish?
Yeah. I wish more people could be part of young companies. I wish smart people default into working at a young company and not in a safe job, because so much creativity and skill is lost when these people, like, kind of like a great company is like a founder problem fit, right? And so many great founders are I won't say lost, but they never discover the problem because they kind of discover sort of like the chores they're giving in a job, right? So I feel like, I mean, I've done this 10 years here, and I really feel like so many incredibly smart people would be such great fit to companies like ours. They could go change the world within this organization or outside, only if they were exposed to it. And I was talking to you earlier how almost our entire leadership team is sort of ex-bankers or consultants, which is a very unreasonable thing to do. But the fact is, some of the smartest people in our region work at consulting firms, those 4 consulting firms. And that's a very natural sort of like habitat for people who got great grades, went to good schools, are generally smart, have been trained well. I mean, I wish they could just take that chance and sort of expose themselves a little bit more to lack of structure, risk, paths that are not super deterministic. I think that's kind of like, I don't know how to evangelize this, but that's something that I think could really foster a culture of like deep entrepreneurship here.
Thank you. Mohammed.
I mean, I'm happy to be part of a region that's actually witnessing a big growth in entrepreneurship. But again, I would also agree with Faraz. I still feel, and I meet a lot of people who are not taking enough risks to get out of the usual path. regionally as well, especially in the Gulf. And I hope that starts changing. That would be my wish, because you still feel a lot of people are going into STEM. They're not going into non-STEM fields. And they're actually losing a lot. And we are losing in part as well, because they're not fulfilling that potential that we think they have. So my wish is get out of that usual path and try something, even if, I mean, we talked a lot about failure here, but don't be worried about failure. Risk-taking is part of the entrepreneurial spirit. Just go into it, try it. If it doesn't work, try something else, but try to get out of the proven path.
Great. Sarah?
I guess the way that I think about it is not necessarily related to entrepreneurship. It's just taking a step back. If I were to talk to the younger generation, it's just to say, it would be great to not walk into your career thinking that there is an end destination or to plan for an end destination. There's a great podcast I'm happy to share it with anyone who's interested that says the path to greatness is not planned. And if you have a plan or a destination in mind, then maybe, I mean, great is subjective, but maybe if you know where you're going, maybe it's not that exciting. But yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would think about is, or I would share is, don't assume that there's a direct way to kind of get somewhere, but also don't necessarily say that this is where I want to be. Just like optimize for where you are today, what you're super curious about, work towards that. It can be entrepreneurship, it can be something else. There's no right or wrong, there's a right or wrong for you.
So for me, is for regarding the VCs, if they're here or they're following us, is to put more trust in African startups. So now I know that it's the case now in the region. You have more dynamic. It's not the case in Africa, except some places like in Nairobi, like in Nigeria, in Morocco. So yeah. We could have another Bay Area, another Silicon Valley, another Kendall Square in Africa. This is the continent of the future. So, but the main point is they need to change the path, they need to take more risks. So, yeah, this is my wish: is this change in mindset regarding the African developing countries in general.
Perfect. I hope that all your wishes will come true. Look, it was fantastic talking to you. There are a few of the points that I have that I noted that for me are quite intriguing and will stay with me. The first one is around the default for a company is death, and you have to fight against that. And I think that's something that stays in my mind. The other person is the concept of failure being personal, and then deal with it, but at least acknowledge that it is something there and deal it the way that is best for you. I think the topic around global versus local. So think global from the beginning, but you have to localize your product. You have to make it relevant for wherever you go for your customers. Then there is a point of schools normally teach us to answer to questions that we know, what we do with unknown questions. I think it's a very profound concept of how we change actually the way we learn. And the last one is what you mentioned now, Sarah, is that if you know where you're going, that is not exciting. So I should probably feel better since I don't know. But the last point that I wanted to make, we started a discussion saying it's probably the most exciting moment to be in this part of the world. We said I had this dream of having these 50 unicorns by 2030. After this discussion, I'm more convinced than ever that actually this will happen. And this will happen thank you to people that are like you here, making it happen firsthand, and the people that are all around us that support it. So great pleasure to be with you, and thank you very much. Thank you.